So melatonin is often thought of as the body's primary sleep hormone, and I guess it is. It's just that it's more than that. One of the things that people say is they go, oh, well, I don't have trouble sleeping. They, well, yeah, you probably don't need it, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't benefit from it. Every time you start taking melatonin or you up your dose, you're going to be groggy for a few days, and then it goes away. I can almost feel the comments, someone just angrily mashing their keyboard in the comments. Some people don't do well with melatonin at all.
So I spend so much time trying to educate people or re-educate them on melatonin because everyone sees it over the counter. Everyone's tried the crappy gummy supplements, which is not the same as what we carry in the clinic, which is pharmaceutical-grade, sustained release, micronized melatonin. So I want to get into what is the differences there, and should you just take it for sleep? How much should you take? And what are the other benefits that we know about?
Yeah, so melatonin is often thought of as the body's primary sleep hormone, and I guess it is. It's just that it's more than that. And one of the things that people say is they go, oh, well, I don't have trouble sleeping, I get to sleep fine, I stay asleep fine, I don't need melatonin. And I'd say, well, yeah, you probably don't need it, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't benefit from it, and it's very inexpensive. We know as of, I have to check this. I say it all the time on podcasts, I need to check the exact date. It's either 2010, 2011, or 2012. There was a very conclusive study showing that when you take melatonin, it doesn't permanently or even have a long-term suppressive effect on your natural production. This was the hypothesis. It wasn't a myth because it was the dominant belief up until this was disproven. And it was suggested that you should take the minimal amount of melatonin, which is typically like 0.1 to 0.3 of a milligram, as little as possible. Like if you're flying into a new time zone or, you really can't sleep, you want to use it very sparingly, because you would suppress your natural production and then you would create more problems and become dependent. This turned out to be not true. And unfortunately, I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of very big, famous people in the scientific space.
Does it start with an H? Does the last name start with an A?
Yep. And I don't understand... I don't know if it's just incompetence or if it's just choosing not to take like a minute to read like very obvious literature, or whether it's just, these people are across so many different subjects that it's difficult to, I'm giving people benefit of the doubt here. But if you go to examine.com, if people just go on Google and just search examine melatonin, there's a very, very well explained article which references the study that shows that natural production is not downregulated. And this, now that we know that you can basically top up your melatonin levels as needed, the argument is that firstly, people have argued that since we discovered fire, we've downregulated melatonin production because now we're out of alignment with the basic sleep-wake cycle. But especially in modern times, especially with these new 4K displays, like retina displays, like yes, they look amazing on your phone, but they are so harsh on your eyes. Yeah. And I think there are very, very, very few, if any, people walking around with optimal melatonin levels. And melatonin and glutathione are your body's two chief antioxidants. And they have very, very profound anti-inflammatory effects, and they have very profound synergistic effects. And when we look at melatonin supplementation, one of the biggest gripes that people have is they go, oh, I take it, and then I wake up in the morning and I just feel horrific. I feel like I need to stay in bed till midday and can't focus and I can't do anything. And this happens when you start taking melatonin because you're used to having this much and now you've got this much. So your receptors were really sensitive, and then you go, oh, okay, I'm netting this huge amount of melatonin activity, which therapeutically might be really beneficial, but for your 7 or 8 a.m. wake up, that might not be so good. Fortunately, though, every shop in the world sells this bean that they powder, and they kind of put some milk in it, and it's called coffee. And it will solve that side effect until it dissipates after a few days. Every time you start taking melatonin or you up your dose, you're going to be groggy for a few days, and then it goes away. There are always exceptions to every rule, and I can almost feel the comment, someone just angrily mashing their keyboard in the comments. Some people don't do well with melatonin at all. I don't know why that is. Maybe they naturally have very high levels, who knows. But I would argue that the majority of people, if they stuck to their melatonin dose for a few days, maybe even a week, that morning grogginess would go away. And what we find is that a lot of people, and Doris Lowe has said this, John, I'm pronouncing his last name wrong, Lawrence, he wrote the book, The Miracle Molecule on Melatonin. They all state, and I found this in my experience with myself and my clients, that once you get the right dose of melatonin, you actually wake up feeling more energetic. I woke up feeling better and more refreshed on 300 milligrams than I did on 3 milligrams. So it sounds like we're sitting here trying to get people to buy our melatonin product rather than get the cheap one off iHerb or Amazon. And that's not the case. You can actually find micronized products online. They're difficult to find. I will name a few, but the difference between just melatonin from, whatever brand compared to pharmaceutical grade is that we're dealing with a micronized hormone. And just like with pregnenolone and DHEA, it's not vital that it's micronized, but it's really important and beneficial for it to be micronized. Because when a hormone is micronized, it can also be referred to as liposomal. The molecule is so tiny that it basically bypasses your liver and your stomach being able to metabolize it, and it gets absorbed in the gut very gradually. So it creates this pseudo-sustained release. If we have extended release matrices that we put medications in to make them last really long, this is kind of like halfway between instant and extended release, so we'll call it sustained release. And it has much greater bioavailability. So you net more for a more kind of gradual period of time. And this is what allows us to confer these really therapeutic benefits of melatonin. In the Miracle Molecule, he talks about making 300 milligram melatonin suppositories. I think compliance would be low.
Yeah.
It would be for me at least, each to their own. But the idea of using micronized is we can get it into the gut that way. There's two ways to get it into the gut. One's going to have much better compliance. So that's a really important point when it comes to melatonin. If people want to try the micronized version without getting it prescribed, you don't really get to be too picky with dosing. I haven't found anyone that does high dose micronized melatonin, but the brands that do make it, well, there's a patented version called Microactive. There's a few products you can get that in. Life Extension make one that's 1.5 milligrams. Quality of Life make one that's 5 milligrams. The company Gorilla Mind or Gorilla Mode, whatever they're called, their sleep product has, I think, 1.5 as well. But anything beyond that, you're going to need to get it prescribed from a pharmacy. And the amount of people who've come back to me through my clinics or through private consults I do with clients all over the world who go, hey, I was previously taking Now Foods or whatever brand, and now I'm taking the one prescribed from my doctor, and the difference is night and day. I've had that feedback so many times that it's almost like if someone's had a bad experience with just regular over-the-counter melatonin, I'm like, look, just ignore that
Gummy bears.
Try this. Gummy bears. I mean, gummy bears are delicious, but you're not going to get good quality hormones in a fucking gummy bear. Yeah.
I would be really compliant if all supplements were in a gummy bear form.
Most people are, and they're just getting the sugar spike and no benefits from them whatsoever, and getting their sleep disrupted by the sugar spike of a gummy bear.
We need to start testosterone gummies. That'll be the
I'm sure that will. Yeah. I'm sure that would go over really well, actually. But the most common question I get is, it will turn off my own production, and I love that you went into that. The other thing, you mentioned that people will feel groggy in the morning. I actually hear more complaints that, it just didn't work for me. And I think also that's probably the quality, that's probably the dosing. Many people need to be taking higher dosing than what, at least initially, or lead up to higher dosing. They'll be on Ambien or Trazodone, and they're trying to get off of those medications by taking 1 milligram of melatonin, and that's usually not going to work. You have to be taking quite a bit more melatonin to be able to get off of these really strong sleep aids.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff there. Like the first point is that there's this myth that the physiological replacement dose is 0.1 to 0.3 milligrams. I don't know how people came up with that number, but I haven't been able to find any literature that supports that. And then when you take into account oral bioavailability, it's like when people say that men make 5 or 6 milligrams of testosterone a day, according to who? This is not really actually agreed upon. Thorne reference a study on their website, which is pretty good, that shows that to actually restore optimal youthful levels, people need between, I think, 3 and 8 milligrams is what they found. And the other point that's important to mention here is that testosterone actually has some antagonistic effects on the melatonin receptor as well. So this kind of goes into a lot of the stuff that I know that you've been trained through WorldLink about the importance of optimizing all the hormones together, is that if you crank one up, you have to have the other ones optimized as well to confer the optimal therapeutic effect. The other point on sleep, which I was going on a bit of a rant yesterday for my group, is that melatonin is not a chemical brick to the head. Trazodone, Ambien, Seroquel, if people are using them, they are chemical bricks to the head, and I think a lot of people really like the feeling of being tranquilized. Guys would love the feeling of taking 5 to 10 milligrams of diazepam before bed, and just kicks in, and all your worries and all the shit that's on your mind just melts away. If something's going to do that, it's not good for your brain. Yeah. And learning to fall asleep and switch your mind off is a really important skill. And melatonin is not going to chemical brick you in the head. Maybe it will for the first few days that you take it, but it's very important when people say, oh, melatonin doesn't work. It's like, it's not a linear sleeping pill. It's not a tranquilizer. And so much of what I talk about in my work and with hormone therapy across the board, but particularly when it comes to falling asleep, is that you have to meet the medicine halfway. So if you're taking melatonin and you're like, I can't sleep, it's like, have you tried counting sheep? Like that used to be really popular. And it was for a reason, because it was about, focusing the mind on something that wasn't inducing a stress response and creating something that was boring that could anchor the attention in the present moment. And I think a lot of guys are just laying there with their mind racing about all the shit they're worried about from the past, all the shit they're worried about from the future, all the stuff that, is triggering these huge cortisol responses and adrenaline responses. And then they wonder why they can't sleep, and it's because they haven't learned to switch their mind off. So I think it's important that people have realistic expectations with melatonin. Just like testosterone won't turn you into the Hulk unless you actually go and train and eat well. Yep. Melatonin won't give you a perfect 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep if you can't, focus on your stresses.
Right. So then talking more about the non-sleep benefits of melatonin, there are a lot of guys who wake up a lot throughout the night to urinate. They think that they're waking up because they have to urinate, or they have back pain. And so in your experience, what have you seen with using melatonin for those purposes?
Yeah, so there's a couple of studies that show the detrimental, because people always come back to me and they go, oh, well, this study showed that melatonin reduces dopamine, and this study showed that it increases prolactin, and this study showed that it, suppresses gonad growth in rats. They give them melatonin at night and they're nocturnal. And people are like, oh, the scientists can't be that stupid. Welcome to literature. A lot of these studies are done on rats at night and they're nocturnal. And this would be the same if you took melatonin every morning. Yeah, you would probably suppress your dopamine production, and you would probably suppress your, if you're, not on TRT, your natural, hormone releases and so forth, because you're just basically throwing the middle finger up to your circadian rhythm, which isn't going to end well. But when it comes to the non-sleep benefits of melatonin, it's basically a healthy anti-inflammatory. So you can kind of think of it like a healthy version of like ibuprofen. And it's also very protective against all the things that we want to be protected from. So it supports insulin sensitivity. It's neuroprotective. It protects the arterial lining. And it has a lot of anti-cancer effects, whether it's preventative or working to support existing cancer treatments. These 4 things tend to be the things that, unless you get hit by a bus, one of those things is going to take you out. So I think starting melatonin supplementation young is one of the best things that men and women can do. For women, it's very effective for helping to support things like endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's profoundly healthy. It's even in micronized versions. It's still very affordable and still very available. But the 2 points that you brought up there are very important, because a lot of clients on TRT and TRT patients all over the world either have issues with chronic pain, from injuries or surgeries or whatever, and also have issues getting up to pee during the night. And when someone is in a lot of physical pain and they can't get comfortable in bed, it actually downregulates your melatonin production. And melatonin is very effective for preventing the needing to void the bladder during the evening. So one thing that I find is very common with guys, particularly guys who are highly anxious, is that they'll go, oh, I started TRT, I'm having to pee 2 or 3 times a night. They probably had to pee 2 or 3 times a night beforehand, but TRT is everything's, problem. And they're immediately worried about their prostate. And they go and get the prostate checked, and it's completely fine. It's exactly the size it should be. It's not impacting the bladder. And the increase in melatonin can be the thing that prevents and supports that. And, there are other ways that you can optimize and support your melatonin production. I also think it's important to support the environment for melatonin. Like, you don't want the screen turned up to like 100 and then you just switch it off and take your melatonin pill and go, oh, I biohacked it. You have to have receptor availability. You have to have the environment in which melatonin should be made. So I think it's still important to focus on things like your light environment, using like programs like Flux on the computer or blue light blocking glasses or reading a book, like, just doing something like that in the evening. But melatonin is something that when people take it for a prolonged period and a therapeutic dose, they often notice and they go, oh, my skin looks better, or these aches and pains I was having during the day are gone away, or I just feel, more cognitively sharp, and my verbal recall is better, and my verbal acuity is better, and all these different factors. And it's because of the increased antioxidant activity.
Beautiful. Love that explanation.
What is testosterone optimization therapy? This is optimizing testosterone levels rather than simply just replacing them. The provider will need to intrinsically understand how testosterone works and how the human body works. So when you follow this process of optimizing testosterone gradually, it allows the patient to acclimatize